This whole time should
Hi, my name is Linda Holley. I'm here to do the final speech. I'm here with my son Daniel. Say hi, Dan.
Hi.
Wanye, say hi, Wanye. Linnell is in the background. She'll be coming in any moment. In our recent events here in the United States, we've been bombarded with scenes from Ferguson, Missouri. In Ferguson, Missouri on Saturday, Mike Brown, an 18-year-old African American male, was shot in the street by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. Apparently, he was shot for walking down the street, is what the latest word on the news. CNN just reported a few minutes ago, where the police chief said he was actually pulled over or stopped because he was walking down the middle of the street, and he wanted him to get off of the highway. So throughout the whole week, we've been bombarded with scenes from this situation, and I'd like to talk to you briefly about. My subject matter is hands up, don't shoot. And this was what Mike Brown said. This was his last statement, according to his friend whom they were walking together down the street. He said the last thing he heard his friend say was, he's got his hands up and says, I don't have a gun. Please don't shoot. I think about it this, and I wrote some things down to let the speech flow, hopefully differently, to persuade you guys that it's important as young black men in America, you have to be careful. I think this. I said, what in the world? It was King Solomon who noted that there is nothing new under the sun. I'm not sure if any of you remember studying the civil rights movement in the 1960s, but if you've been watching the news over the past week, images look very similar. You guys remember civil rights in your history classes?
Yes.
Okay. History has a way of repeating itself. This repetition could possibly be like repeating a class you failed or retaking a test you tanked. I know that feeling. Maybe the repetition is meant for us to get it right. Unfortunately, the catalyst that reminds us we're in another historical loop is normally some egregious act of injustice. Someone somewhere has to die or be killed. Some innocence has to be lost, or some innocent killed in the street, unarmed, on his knees with his hands up in the universal sign of surrender. Hands up, don't shoot. Yes, all eyes are currently on Ferguson, Missouri now, but this is so much bigger than Ferguson. For America, our not so distant past has in its history a myriad of socially acceptable injustices. The enslavement of an entire race of people, the ownership, rape, murder, lynches, degradation of Africans brought to this country against their wills. Lynching was so acceptable that we actually have a city named named to celebrate it, Lynchburg. But where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Challenges that have persisted in our country, including crime and punishment, cruel and unusual treatment of some of its citizens, and obvious injustice, cover-ups and disenfranchisements, continue to this very day. The idea of creation, a world created by God where human and animals coexist peaceably, cohabitating, has become a mere myth. The same issues that Adam and Eve faced in the Garden of Eden face us today. The element of evil, persuasion, the very serpent in the garden of society, exists in our community. Hatred has motivated many conflicts. Acts of violence abound. When faced with such acts, we haste to call 911, the universal emergency number, and the response we receive is the police. But what happens when the very emergency responders, the police, are also the perpetrators of violent acts? The amount of distrust and unrest in the affected community can be overwhelming. This is the actual situation in our country. We have witnessed over the past few years growing occurrence of law enforcement actually killing young black unarmed men. The most recent, Mike Brown, was an 18-year-old black man unarmed and gunned down in the middle of the street. How do I feel uncomfortable knowing the person who is supposed to protect me is the same person who's killing our sons? This was just recently at the Ed Show today. just about an hour ago before I started filming this speech. The New York Times has a documentary. It's called Times Docs, and it was dated June 12th. And it depicts a young black man who has been stopped over 15 times by police before he turned 18 years old in New York City. A young man who has never committed a crime. Here's a quote from the Huffington Post. Within law enforcement, as with all professions, there are certain people who bend the rules and perhaps even hide behind the bureaucracy and systematic evils that enable breaches of conduct. Research from Northwestern University states that more than 10,000 complaints of police abuse were filed with the Chicago police between 2002 and 2004, but only 19 resulted in meaningful disciplinary action. A new study asserts also, before Michael Brown's death in Ferguson, police in Missouri were already grappling with the issue of racial profiling, according to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, May 19, 2014. And the quote continues, undoubtedly, the fact that most complaints against the police abuse go unpunished contributes directly to the prevalence of such abuse. However, when both the American public and the police departments are aware of the problem, why have the deaths of unarmed black citizens like Eric Garner and Michael Brown become horrifyingly commonplace? They become commonplace news stories. That was in the Huffington Post today. If it were just a single instance, if it was just one act, we could possibly attribute this terrible trend to chance. But unfortunately, it has become commonplace to kill African American boys and men. CNN reports the Ferguson police officer who has shot Michael Brown didn't stop him because he was suspected of a recent robbery, but because he was walking down the middle of the street, blocking traffic. The city's police chief said Friday, that's today. Greg Bertonello writes, CNN, NBC, and other news outlets have also followed the incredible story over the past week. A Facebook associate of mine, he is there currently in Ferguson, Missouri. His personal eyewitness accounts of the activities have been amazing. He testified about how he was tear gassed, how he couldn't continue to speak to people in terms of trying to pray for them. He's a pastor, Rashad Cartwright. He's there praying. He's there trying to help them hope again. And he was tear gassed, although he didn't witness any retaliation from the crowd. NAACP